Insurance companies on any level will not pay when a police force is in the wrong. This is why police officers get away with everything. Hello, it's September 2022, and before I get into the topic of this video, I just want to say recently I've been given some more detailed information, updates if you want to call it that, with regards to the Christine Well and her family story, and I have to say it is absolutely appalling. Now, I'm not going to be sharing any of those details, at least at this time, but I really encourage everyone to reach out to her and her family and give them the support that they need and deserve. Now, continuing on with the theme of false narratives, false accusations, wrongful convictions, I'm going to be talking about a person by the name of James Scott. Now, around 1993 in Missouri, there was a great flood. And what had happened was the levees, the dikes had broke and caused this great flood. And that crime was pinned on him. And he was convicted actually twice. The second time in 1998 for causing this catastrophe. He proclaimed his innocence to this day. And a little backstory on this person. He had a colorful past with law, meaning that he wasn't the most upstanding citizen. In fact, if I remember correctly, he had burnt down a school. But, you know, as bad as that is, no one was hurt. It was after hours and everything, but he did do that. And he confessed to that. However, later on, with this flood, kind of some little twists and turns with that, he happened to be in the area and noticed that there was water coming through this levee that was holding the water back. Now, the water had risen, I think, about 15 feet above where it was considered safe anyway. And he removed some sandbags to fill a spot where there were no sandbags, trying to help. He had left to get help or something to that effect, and during that time it broke and flooded everything. Now, there was, I believe he was a retired police detective. I'd seen him on the news being interviewed or something, talking about this. And this retired police detective knew of his criminal history. And so they proceeded to charge and convict him for this event. Now, there were expert witnesses, real expert witnesses during the first trial, where they testified that the levees broke on their own. In fact, if anyone was to have tried to sabotage that structure, it would have been suicide for them, because the water would have just burst through as they stood there and would have killed them. Now, during the second trial, they had a retrial over a technicality. The prosecution had brought in a so-called expert witness, someone with the Marine Corps who knew something about building these things, but they weren't a true expert like these other engineers during the first trial. And they testified, absolutely, somebody would have had to cause it because those levees were holding. Now, what's interesting, now keep in mind, this is years and years later, and we're just dealing on people's opinions. But during that time, just prior to the breach, there were airplanes and helicopters flying in that area, waiting for that levee to break, long before Mr. Scott arrived to the scene. They knew it was going to break. It was just a matter of time. Now, there's a lot of details that the official narrative doesn't talk about. So why did they need to pin this on an innocent person? Well, insurance. Apparently, the insurance companies were not paying anyone. They were not paying the farmers, the businesses, the county, or the state for that flood. Now, there's different explanations as to why they weren't doing it. I'm not going to get into that. But it was because the insurance company wasn't going to pay. Now, and it had something to do with the act of God clause or something. But they had to pay if it was an act of vandalism, a criminal act. And this is where James Scott fits in. Now that he's convicted, serving a life sentence, the insurance companies have to pay everyone out. And there's a lot of people, like in any other story, who believe that he's actually guilty. There are a lot of people who know but don't care, or they've convinced themselves over time that, yeah, he must have did something to assist this. But overall, they convicted, it appears anyway, to be an innocent person of a crime he didn't commit, serving a life sentence for causing the flood of 1993 in Missouri. And they convicted him simply for the insurance money. Now, can you imagine how he feels every day knowing he's innocent and vilified with the official narrative? So anyone in the world would read the official narrative and think, yeah, this guy is completely nuts. Lock him up, throw away the key. Now, he did say at some point something to the effect of he was trying to help, and if he did cause the breach, that wasn't his intention. But as the original experts on these structures said, it would have been suicide if he was just pulling out sandbags to let the water rush through. It would have killed him instantly. He would have had no time to run, even drive away. Now, it's up to you to decide whether he did it intentionally, unintentionally, or if he didn't do it at all. But you have to look at the facts of the case, where the water level was 15 feet above what was considered safe, and it was going over the top anyway. And we all know, for example, with dams and such, that once the water starts to go over the top, it's game over. The structural integrity of that structure is beyond compromised. So there's a lot of things to consider, but the most interesting part is the insurance company is not wanting to pay out. And then you compound that, the second half, how people didn't care about this individual's life. They just threw him away so they can collect the insurance money. Now, when you incorporate, for example, the studies made famous by Julia Shaw, implanting false memories, the people who knew he was innocent convinced themselves over time, and possibly even hated him for committing an act that he didn't do, but they convinced themselves that he did it, as with everyone else. That is injustice. That is based on money. Now, when we look at my case, for example, I was found to be found guilty of allegedly assaulting a police officer in alleged obstruction because I was suing the city of Calgary, the two former officers, the former chief of police, and whoever else in the lawsuit. And they needed my conviction as a defense. Now, anyone, even with a basic understanding of law, understands why. Because if I'm found guilty of those two alleged charges, then I caused my own injuries. I caused everything. and that's the defense for the lawsuit, they're not liable. Same thing applies, for example, with Mr. Scott, James Scott. Kind of a little different twist to it, though. This type of injustice happens all the time. I don't know what more I can say about that. I thought I'd share this story as another example, compounded with Daniel Holtzclaw, Stephen Avery, and there's been a few others that I've mentioned over the years. A lot of injustice happening every day. Things to think about. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share.
Listen to this and write it down if you can't remember it. You're never going to outgrow warfare. You simply must learn to fight. I hear people saying to me, oh, when is it going to get easier? When you die.